All right, so part two on how a good business leader makes decisions. So in the first section, I spent a few minutes talking about making sure that get familiar with the different ethical approaches in business decision making, from Immanuel Kant to Aristotle and Plato, um, and knowing how to think through the problems. Is it for the greater good? Are we making decisions that generates the most good for the most amount of people? Do we follow natural law, which means that natural law type of ethical behavior supersedes everything else, whether it's against um, uh, statutory law or not? So those are things that you should be aware of, and they're all very important because they determine your priority and your decision and how you balance the decision making out. Right. So ethics is a big part in your decision. Law. So understanding what are the characteristics of law in that particular decision making, if it's a contractual issue, if it's a property issue, or is it a discriminatory issue that you're dealing with in your company. So a thorough understanding of what the law is important because that's what allows you to generate a decision that remains compliant within the law so you don't get yourself in trouble, the company in trouble, and subject yourselves to liabilities. Right? Then the other component is, well, from a business standpoint, what makes most sense? What generates the greatest amount of profits and good from the perspective of your stakeholders in that decision making process? So these are all things that you have to weigh out. The chapter does a pretty good job at saying, uh, certain types of questions that you can ask yourself as to whether this a good decision is being made. Would you say this to your CEO? Could you present an action plan? Could you, if you are presenting this to a significant loved one, would would they cringe when you're giving the solution to it? So these are kind of guidelines that sometimes um, contest the soundness of the decision. However, I strongly recommend that you only use these as guides, not as the standard in which you make your decisions. The standard in which you make the decision has to be your own values that you derive by balancing the ethics, the legality of it, and the stakeholders' interest. Um, because other parties may not have a full understanding of the totality of the picture that's involved in that decision making. It's one of the sins of being a leader is that you're lonely and at the top, and when you make those decisions, the people that you're often asking advice from or bouncing ideas off have a very limited picture of what is involved in that decision making. You know, how does it impact certain employees? How does it impact the profitability side of things? Um, how does it impact values that you adopt as important from a social agenda standpoint? So there are a lot of factors that are very difficult to balance out, and so I think it's always sounds to bounce ideas off. But at the end of the day, you're the leader. You make those decisions, um, and uh, and all three of those components that I said are extremely important. Um, a lot of pressures will be imposed on you in these types of decisions, and you need to understand how to deal with them. I'm going to make one more video on this particular topic, and that's dealing with the social agenda issue and in your decision making process. All right. Thank you, guys.